Hi, everyone. So thank you so much for this opportunity and for providing me with this platform to talk about something that I am deeply passionate about. So I want to begin by telling you all a story about someone very special to me, who in many ways shaped my perspective on some pretty deep moral issues, someone who really affected my life's trajectory. So you're probably thinking about a person, but no, she was a pony, and her name was Shadow. When I met her, she was a 4-year-old rescued pony with a deep fear and mistrust of humans. Her hooves were long and ridden with infection, and you couldn't as much as approach her without her darting away, flashing the whites of her eyes in fear. This picture is a pretty typical depiction of Shadow as she was in the first few weeks, because my only interaction with her was me trying to approach her and her running away from me. So at just 4 years old, Shadow had already had a 2-year-old foal. She had been bred when she was just a baby herself, which is very, very traumatizing for the horse, like emotionally and physically. And her entire existence up until this point had consisted of a barren dirt paddock with barbed wire fencing and the harshness of her human owners. Shadow couldn't talk, but she had seen the worst in mankind, and she taught me what neglect looked like and what voicelessness felt like. And this lesson stuck with me. In fact, Shadow may be the reason that I'm here at Brandeis today, as playing a role in her early training, teaching her to accept human touch and introducing her to human kindness, was the subject of my college essay. Playing a role in her magnificent transformation from fearful and shaggy to trusting and healthy was energizing and empowering. I wanted to find my community at Brandeis of like-minded people who also wanted to change the world, which for me, as a pre-veterinary student, meant healing one broken creature at a time. This is what social justice looks like to me. However, it's been my experience here at Brandeis that when we talk about social justice, we're really only talking about a few issues. We're talking about women's rights, racial and economic inequality, gender, the stigma of mental health, the prison industrial complex. And don't get me wrong, these are extremely relevant issues and each one is touched by deep injustice. In fact, I have engaged with my peers in many fruitful and important conversations on these topics. But valuable as they may be, I think we need to recognize the limitations of our social justice narratives. So is there something about this term social justice that only applies to issues affecting humans? Because the more that I thought about animal welfare being left out of the narrative of social justice, the more I found examples in my everyday life, in social media, and in the newspaper supporting this idea that there's a lack of dialogue and a lack of acknowledgement of the relevance and importance of animal welfare. For example, while the aforementioned human welfare issues have all gotten their limelight in this ongoing presidential campaign, only one of our candidates has as much as mentioned animal welfare as a concern. And we live in a country touched deeply by injustice to animals. A country in which over 100,000 domesticated horses are sent to slaughter each year because of overpopulation caused by unscrupulous breeding, in which more than 10,000 puppy mills produce puppies for sale in horrifying conditions, and in which more than 9 billion animals die in factory farms each year, unprotected by the federal animal welfare laws that protect our own pets. So this is my question. Why do we, as people who are so concerned about achieving justice and uplifting the most marginalized, hardly ever talk about animals? So before I delve into answering this question, I want to give you a glimpse of my upbringing to show you where I'm coming from and why I've been thinking about this issue so much. So these are some pictures from my childhood. My mom has worked in animal welfare since I was 5 years old, so for the past 16 years. And so from an early age, I was naturally taught to value animal life just as much as I value human life. And it's been difficult for me to realize that this is a unique perspective. And living away from home has shown me that most people do not have the privilege of this kind of upbringing, that society has ingrained most of us with this idea that humans are unquestionably superior to animals, and therefore our lives are inherently more valuable. But I want to challenge you to question this idea. I recently saw a wonderful documentary called Speciesism, which explores what it makes out to be a radical idea, that discrimination against non-human animals on the basis of their species is wrong, and akin to the many other forms of discrimination that our society unarguably frowns upon. Mark DeVry, the documentary producer and narrator, delves into this idea that for all of our feelings of superiority above other animals, when you really question what it is that makes us human, there's actually very little that separates us from other species. For example, some may say, what makes us human is that we're not driven by instinct. Instead, we're capable of rational thought and we're driven by our reason and our ethics. However, DeVries shows that there are many examples of humans who do not fall within these lines. For example, infants and severely developmentally disabled adults, individuals that we obviously consider human and to whom we of course extend all human rights and privileges. Likewise, the acclaimed moral philosopher Peter Singer, author of the book Animal Liberation, wrote on the topic of speciesism, as you can see. The argument, in essence, is that we have, over centuries of history, expanded this circle of beings whom we regard as morally significant. If you go back in time, you'll find tribes that were essentially only concerned with their own tribal members. If you were a member of another tribe, you would be killed with impunity. When we got beyond that, there were still boundaries to our moral sphere, but those were based on nationality or race or religious belief. Anyone outside those boundaries didn't count. Slavery is the best example here. If you were not a member of the European race, if you were African specifically, you could be enslaved. So we got beyond that. We have expanded the circle beyond our own race, and we reject as wrongful the idea that something like race or religion or gender can be a basis for claiming another being's interest count less than our own. So the argument is that this isn't also an arbitrary stopping place. It's also a form of discrimination, which I call speciesism, that has parallels with racism. In both cases, you have this group that has power over the outsiders and develops an ideology that says those outside our circle don't matter, and therefore we can make use of them for our own convenience. That is what we have done and still do with other species. So, in my opinion, animals represent the ultimate in vulnerability. In our society, domesticated animals are completely dependent upon us to fulfill even their most basic needs, illustrated through my story of Shadow. And unlike every other marginalized group, no matter their intelligence or sentience, animals do not have the capacity to voice their need for proper treatment. Therefore, I think that the state of animal welfare can act as a litmus test for society's overall moral worth because it shows us how our society values the most vulnerable and the most voiceless. This is why, in my opinion, despite anyone's thoughts on the actual issues of animal welfare and animal rights themselves, these animal welfare and animal rights absolutely cannot be separated from the narrative of social justice. And I would argue that many, if not most, animal welfare issues are also human welfare issues. For example, the factory farms that are known for their egregious violations of animal welfare are also known for mistreating their workers, who have to put up with work made unnecessarily dangerous due to the same fixation on efficiency and bottom-line dollar that causes the animals to suffer. Likewise, it is an often cited fact that people guilty of animal abuse are statistically more likely to abuse their spouses and their children. Facing the cruelty that is deeply ingrained within our society is not comfortable, or is it easy. But comfort breeds complacency, and recent triumphs for animal welfare show the promise for positive change that exists when people recognize these injustices and mobilize as a result. So going back to my story of Shadow, remember this fearful pony? So after just a few months of treating Shadow with proper kindness and respect, her demeanor transformed completely, from timid and anxious to playful and affectionate. So do you recognize this pony, the one who wouldn't even let me approach her without her running away? And in this picture, I couldn't get far back enough because she kept trying to come up to me. So Shadow's happy ending illustrated for me the lengths to which just a little compassion and consideration can go. And speaking of animal welfare victories, on the larger scale, I'm sure many of you heard that last month, SeaWorld announced it will be ending its breeding program of captive orcas, a victory for the intelligent and sensitive animals who cannot thrive physically or emotionally in captivity. Last year, Barnum and Bailey Circus announced that it will phase out elephants from its performances, another huge leap forward that illustrates our slowly changing national consciousness on the treatment and respect of animals. While all of these are small steps forward, when you consider the bigger picture, None of these or other victories could have happened without the courage of a small group of people to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves and recognize the significance and validity of animal welfare causes in a world with so many seemingly more important issues. As I hope I've demonstrated, while it's easy to overlook animal welfare violations in light of the many other instances of injustice in our society, humanity takes its root from the word humility. And in a world that can be neither just nor kind, what better way to reclaim our humanity than by recognizing, respecting, and fighting for the inherent rights of our non-human kin? Thank you.